spoken on what appears to be such a dangerous platform. One step to the left and I'll fall off. So I'm going to speak for a very short period. I'm going to tell you very briefly what I did as a hobby when I was still in England. Because as a lawyer I was unable to play golf during the day, so I had to have an evening job as a hobby, and so I decided to take on an analysis of the BBC's coverage of the Middle East. And what I did was, instead of doing what most people did, which was write lots of angry letters whenever they saw something they didn't like, I took the BBC's answers to those letters, which is, well, of course this programme said this, but if you look over a period, then you'll see we're very balanced. So I thought, right, I'll hire a student and I will record everything they say about the Middle East for 6 months. And I will then analyse it and see if that defence holds water. And I then produced a report because naturally it didn't hold water. And I then went on to produce 5 or 6, in fact in the end about 7 or 8 reports. And the BBC response was initially to just write a polite one-line letter saying we disagree. But the first report went viral on the internet, and the second time they wrote a report twice as long as my own report to them, rebutting everything I said. The third report, I got a letter from the head of news threatening me with defamation action, which was one of the nicest letters I've ever received in my life. And then they invited me to meet them and have a nice cosy armchair chat. I then debated with them on various public points, and they then got to the point where they refused and they pulled out of debates if I was actually on the debate. So I began to realise I was beginning to get to them. Now, what that story tells is really that it is within anybody's ability, by concentrating and focusing on a single target in a methodical way, to have a real effect. And everybody in this room should feel empowered to be able to have an effect by focusing and by taking on the difficulties which the media present in relation to Israel, and actually making certain targeted, focused, properly identified targets to solve, developing a strategy, and you can actually make a significant difference. So in that sense, there's an enormous amount which we can do. And there were various articles written about the reports that I wrote at the time, and people referred to what I was doing, and many others, as outsourcing the problem of Hasbara. And in a sense, that's what's happened. And the people on this panel here are people who have outsourced Hasbara, and that is a fantastic development. Truth be told, is another example of outsourcing this problem to us, the people, to try and resolve this difficulty. I just want to close with my greatest fear and putting a challenge to everyone in this room today. My greatest fear is that the democracies of the West, and in particular America, will get to such a pitch in terms of their attitude towards Israel that it is simply politically not viable to be seen in any way to be supporting Israel. American president really has to stick his neck out at times in order to veto resolutions in the United Nations. If it gets to a point where it is politically so damaging for a politician to be seen to be supporting Israel that they simply cannot justify doing it, even if that's their personal predilection, and one can't always guarantee that that will be the personal predilection of any politician. If it gets to the point where they listen to their voters' voices, and their voters' voices are howling against them because of their support of Israel, then they will have to stop supporting Israel in public places like the United Nations. If that happens, then it won't be very long before there are successful resolutions which start perhaps in a small way, but quite quickly can grow. It won't take very much for there to be a boycott of Israel. Most economies around the world can survive without trading with Israel. Israel cannot survive for any period of time without having free trade and free relationships with the rest of the world. This is more than a systemic problem. It's a cataclysmic problem which is facing Israel, And it is happening within the democracies because Israel's image is being destroyed by this brilliant campaign by our detractors to make it actually a viable, possible situation that the Western world removes its support in the public domain from Israel. If that happens, we are finished. There is a great deal to be said for outsourcing this problem to the people, but it's not enough. The fact is that in order to develop an adequate strategy to solve this problem, and it is solvable, I can't believe the rest of the world can be taught to love us, but they can be taught, the vast majority who are essentially neutral, can be taught to recognise that what they're being given is lies. And that has to be done in an incredibly well-funded, well-organised strategy. That strategy can only come from one place. And that funding can only come from one place, and that is the Israeli government. And until the Israeli government wakes up and realises how significant this problem is, we are facing an ever-growing problem. Yeah. Truth be told, other organisations like it can do an enormous amount in sticking their fingers in the dike. But that is not going to be enough. And the challenge I would like to make to this room is to say, truth be told, and every person in this room should be using every possible opportunity they can to make the Israeli government, which is the only organisation in the world with the need, the motivation and the money and the ability to be organised, it isn't yet, that everybody in this room should be pressurising at every possible opportunity the Israeli government to realise how significant this problem is and to fund it adequately in order to develop a proper long-term strategy to dealing with this in a serious way.
Thank you very much, Trevor. I would like to introduce David Olesker, who is the founder and director of the Jerusalem Center for Communication and Advocacy Training. A former student leader in the UK, David has become one of the world's top advocacy trainers. He works with students, community activists, and the staff of professional Israel advocacy organizations around the world. And his clients have included major organizations such as the Anti-Defamation League and AIPAC, as well as grassroots groups. He's based in Jerusalem. He travels often to North America and other countries. David Olesker.